Okay, there we go. Takes about 20 seconds.
Okay, there we go. So we're on.
So is that how it
That's
works?
the live feed. Good evening and welcome to our next Aged Care Reviews Facebook Live Q&A session. I'm being joined tonight in Brisbane by David Codey. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Ken.
Fantastic. So very excited tonight. David is joining us. David is an accredited aged care financial advice specialist in the area, as I said, of aged care. And tonight's topic will be, in fact, questions to do with aged care fees, charges and finances. So it's an interactive Q&A session. So please do feel free to jump in, type your comments below the screen and ping them through, and David and I will do our best to get to them tonight. So first off, some background. As I mentioned, my name's Ken. I'm one of the co-founders of Aged Care Reviews. Aged Care Reviews was formed in 2013 after an experience I had with one of my family members placing into aged care, and our co-founder Andrew had in placing one of his family members into aged care. Through that experience, we really found that there wasn't a lot of information available for families to make that very important decision. So we decided to form Aged Care Reviews. It's a consumer review website where families can read about the experiences of others. Really, our mission is to facilitate informed decisions in aged care. That means information, advice and support. And that's what tonight's all about. So we know roughly about 100,000 Australians enter into aged care each year. We know that for a lot of them, they're asked to pay a bond, now called a refundable accommodation deposit. And that bond, the average bond is $400,000 across Australia. So that's a lot of money. We also know that the Australian government pays for most of the costs of aged care in Australia, but families are asked to make a contribution. So tonight's topic will be exploring that in a bit more depth, understanding what contributions families will be asked to make, when they're asked to make them, and if so, how. So before I introduce David, I'll very quickly give an overview of how tonight will work. Over the next hour or so, David and I will be talking about the 20 or so most common questions that we've experienced at Aged Care Reviews to do with aged care fees and charges. As I mentioned, the great thing about Facebook is it's interactive. So if you've got your own question, feel free to ping it in, and we'll do our best to get to it. Equally, if you think this topic is of interest to your family or friends, please feel free to share this Facebook feed. You can do that by clicking the share button, which should be located at the bottom of your screen. Hopefully we can bring some value to your family and friends if they're equally looking at the aged care placement process. And finally, at Aged Care Reviews, we have an aged care fees fact sheet that we make available for free to families. So if at any point throughout the stream tonight you'd like a copy of that, please click the heart button. It's a red heart button, little icon you'll see. We'll make sure we get a copy of that to you. So, as I mentioned, my name's Ken. I'm one of the co-founders at Aged Care Reviews, and this is our Facebook Q&A to do with aged care fees, charges and finances. So, David, thanks for obviously joining us tonight. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do at Morgans Financial.
Thanks, Ken, and look forward to sharing with people online all the issues around fees, because in my experience it's a very confusing area. Some families that I talk to can refer to it as a minefield. So I think it sometimes can be. Can I just say, putting my financial advisor's hat on, can I just firstly say that, and for those that joined the the session earlier, you would have seen a disclaimer, what we call a general disclaimer. So whenever you see a financial services presentation, there is a disclaimer put up because we're going to talk about general subjects today, general advice. So I'm not going to touch on any personal circumstances because once you do that, it has to be what they call personal financial advice. So tonight is about general advice and hopefully answering some questions for anyone that asks any questions. So in terms of the background on Morgans, Ken, Morgans Financial Group is a national organisation involved in stockbroking advice, financial planning advice, wealth management, corporate advisory. We have 60 offices around Australia. We have about 520 financial advisors. And just to give you a sense about where aged care financial advice fits in with those 520 advisors, we only probably have about half a dozen that are accredited aged care advice providers. And that probably is the way it is across the industry. It's a very specialist area. It's an area that not all advisors want to delve into for the whole range of issues, the emotional circumstances that families find themselves in when they need to talk about finding a place for a loved one and all the financial aspects associated with it. So just to give you a sense, so the team that I set up in Brisbane, our head office is here in Brisbane, provides support to our network and to clients and to people that need access to aged care advice.
Gotcha. And obviously important about that disclaimer. So, as I said, for those who have just joined us, my name's Ken. I'm one of the co-founders at Aged Care Reviews. I'm being joined tonight by David Codey from Morgans Financial to talk about aged care fees and charges. So, we'll jump straight into it. Do you want to give us a bit of an overview about how fees work in aged care? Give us a starting point.
Yeah, it's always a problem when you have a starting point, Ken, because with aged care fees, it's unfortunately it's all over the place. There's just so many different aspects of it. But I suppose when I talk to families, perhaps I can just take you through how that works. Because most people that we talk to, they've done some research. They've Googled, they've gone to My Aged Care, the government website. So they're getting a feel for fees. Now, it's very hard to actually line all those fees up and see how they interact with each other. So when I talk to a family, this is how I take a family through in a general sense how it works. A family will say, look, we've found a particular nursing home that we'd like mum or dad or grandma or grandpa to go into, and they've said there's an accommodation payment. As I say to families, it's a room price. You have to agree to pay a certain room price called an accommodation payment, and there's a lot of terminology in this space. I'm going to try and keep that to a minimum tonight because there's so many acronyms it just makes my head spin. So the room price is set. Just to give you a sense of that, the average across Australia in the last 12 months was about $400,000, just under $400,000. Yeah. So a family on behalf of their loved one who may become a resident of that home agrees, right, that's the price that we have to pay. They then have the right to decide how they will pay for that amount of money to secure the room.
Gotcha.
They can pay that all as a lump sum, and we'll talk more about that shortly. They can pay none of it as a lump sum, or they can pay some of it as a lump sum. And there's various strategies around that. That secures the room. So you've got the room.
Right.
Then there's a fee called a basic daily fee.
Right.
And that's set at 85% of the single person age pension. So that will change over time as the pension goes up. Yep. Unfortunately, the pension only goes up quite slowly, as a lot of families we talk to suggest it could go up faster, but I'm not sure we could put the government under any pressure to do any more in that regard.
Not tonight, anyway.
Not tonight, no. So that's set at $49.07 a day. So it's about $17,900 a year is the basic daily fee that someone would pay, and that's to provide them with the 24/7 care once they're in the nursing home, residing in the nursing home. But wait, there's more, unfortunately. The government subsidises everyone that goes into care, but they reserve the right to ask people that have got a certain level of means, i.e. assets and income, to contribute to the cost of that care. And they do that through a thing called a means-tested fee. Now, I won't go through the calculation now, but it's something that we do for families when they want to get down to the nitty-gritty of how all the fees work and can we afford those fees or not, etc., etc. So it's a fee that can be paid. So, and there's caps on that fee on an annual basis and on a lifetime basis. But that means-tested fee is just for you to contribute to the cost of your care if you have the means to do so.
Gotcha. That was pretty complicated.
Yes. I'm trying to make it as simple as I can, but it is quite convoluted. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. So we've got the basic daily care fee. So that's associated to the pension. Does everyone have to pay that?
Yes.
Okay. So that can't be negotiated?
No.
Okay. So that's set by the government, is it?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right. And then, maybe without going into a lot of detail, the means-tested fee, how does the government work that out? What are they looking at? Give us a feel for what that looks like.
I don't like that sort of question, Ken, because there's no simple answer to that. It's a calculation. So what you basically have to do is you have to look at the income, the assessable income, and I'll keep using that word accessible, and for families that have dealt with Centrelink or the Department of Human Services over time, they'll understand what I mean by accessible income and accessible assets. That's how the means-tested fee works. So there's an accessible income component, and if you're just on the age pension, it's the age pension less the supplements.
Yep.
You then take off a threshold, there's a few little bit of maths around that, and you work out, so is your income going to contribute to that means-tested fee? If you're on the full age pension and have no other real sources of income, the answer to that question is no. Then you look at accessible assets, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting for people that may be homeowners, maybe in a couple, in a relationship where there's a home involved or not. So it's accessible assets, which will be cash at bank, term deposits, whatever else. Look at that, and there's a sliding scale that's calculated on that. Gotcha.
And what's the process behind that? How does the government get that information? How does a family go about giving that information to the government?
If a family talks to a financial advisor such as myself or a specialist in this space, they can do the calculation, and we do the calculation for families, obviously, as part of what we do.
Yep.
Eventually, though, they will have to get the government to do their calculation, and I say eventually because we sometimes like to say to families, get someone independent to do that for you before you fill in the form for the government. Now, the form is a wonderful form, Ken, and I'm being facetious when I say that because it is a 28.5-page questionnaire, which is called an assets and income assessment form. It's got a far longer title than that, but I'm just going to abbreviate that for the sake of people watching tonight. That has to be filled in and sent off to the Department of Human Services, DHS, who will then send a letter back and saying, we've had a look, we've assessed your income and assets, and we assessed your means-tested fee to be X.
Gotcha.
What families have to understand is that it's not a set and forget fee. If your assessable assets and income rise over time, that fee will go up. But in our experience, mostly over time, assets and income tend to drop away once people go into residential care. So that fee will go down over time. And as I said, there's also annual and lifetime caps on that fee.
Gotcha. So welcome everyone to our feed. This is Facebook Live Q&A being hosted by Aged Care Reviews. My name's Ken. I'm one of the co-founders here at Aged Care Reviews. We're getting some questions, I think. I can't necessarily see the questions at my end. No? Okay, all good. All right. So as I said, if this feed is adding value and you think may be able to help out your family and friends, please feel free to share this feed by clicking the share button. Equally, if you'd like a copy of our free aged care fees fact sheet, please click the red heart button icon and we'll make sure we get a copy of that out to you. So we've covered the basic care fee and we've covered the means-tested care fee. So you started off by talking about the accommodation fee. Can you walk us through that a bit? How does that work?
So again, as we said, the aged care facility will set the price of a room, and they usually have various rooms and they have various, sometimes additional services that can be part of that room. I should have also mentioned there is one additional fee, which I should have mentioned, which is what they call an additional or an extra services fee that some facilities will charge, some nursing homes will charge. They're in the minority at the moment. That may change over time, but that might be another fee that has to be paid. And the reason that's a consideration because it's got to be paid from from cash flow, from income that the resident is receiving either as an age pension or a DVA pension.
So it's on top?
Or private pension. Yes, it's
Okay.
on top. So coming back to the room, so let's just hypothetically speaking, we're saying, let's say the room price was $400,000.
Yep.
Any amount you don't pay of that lump sum of towards that $400,000, there is an interest rate applied to that. Now the interest rate is called the maximum permissible interest rate. It's set by the federal government. It's currently, I shouldn't have used that, put that term in, it's dreadful. But so it's an interest rate and it's 5.73%, and it changes as interest rates go up and down. That will change. It's as I say, it's set by the federal government. So let's say you didn't pay any of that $400,000 as a lump sum towards that room price. Okay, 400,000 multiplied by 5.73% would be the amount that you would have to pay to effectively rent the room. It's called a daily accommodation payment. But when I talk to families, I say it's like you're renting the room. So you haven't bought the room.
Yep.
You've actually rented the room, and therefore, again, when you're paying rent, where's that rental income going to come from, or that rental outgoing that you've got to pay?
Yep. Okay, so you've got a lump sum, which I think used to be known as the bond. So now it's got a fancier name, a RAD, and then you've got this daily fee, which is like the rent. Which can be paid alongside or in place of that lump sum.
Yes.
So with that room payment amount, so whatever the facility is charging, is that negotiable? Is that something a family can go back and forth with the provider on?
Absolutely. And we talk to families about that. We say, look, and I think Australians are very good at asking the question. And so we always say to families, when you're talking to a facility, you ask the question, because the nursing homes, as you would understand, Ken, are really about occupancy. I mean, they're almost like hotels. They like to have occupancy, and if they have, some rooms available, they may be more flexible on the price. So if they've set the price at, say, $400,000, and you say, listen, would you, family goes and said, would you accept 375 or 350?
Yep.
In my experience, sometimes that happens. It depends on the demand and supply situation for that particular nursing home. And that varies from nursing home to nursing home and from area to area across Australia.
Yeah. And so obviously, your advice there is just ask the question.
Absolutely ask the question.
Gotcha. Okay, and without getting too complex and technical, that room price, does that impact the pension? Because obviously, a lot of people out there will be on the pension as well. How does that all work?
It's a very good question, Ken. The answer is everything in aged care. It depends. And any amount you pay as a lump sum towards that room, the RAD that we're talking about there, is not accessible for Centrelink or DVA age pension calculations. Okay.
Yep.
So there's a trade-off there, but remembering what you do pay as a lump sum is accessible as far as the means-tested fees are concerned from the aged care. So what we find with families, we used to have to look at options where what's the trade-off between, is the means-tested fee going to be more than, or the pension is reduced? Do you see what I mean? Okay. Depending on how that happens. Yep. So, and that's usually the case if people choose, depending on what they do with their family home. That can be a big swing factor.
Which is, I imagine, a lot of the questions you get initially from families approaching you, wanting to speak to someone who knows what those numbers are and can help them through that situation.
It's all about affordability. We try and break it down, families, and say, look, it's about affordability, because if someone's in an area where they say, look, the only room we can get is a $500,000 room, and they say, look, we don't think mum or dad or their loved one can afford that, we can usually put their mind at ease and say you can afford it, but it depends on how you're going to fund that.
Yep.
And then again, the trade-off between age pension you might be receiving and any lump sum that you have available to pay, or do you have to do something with the family home?
Yep. Gotcha. So this RAD, it's obviously a lot of money that the family is being asked to pay to the operator. Is that money protected? What happens if the provider goes broke?
That's a very good point. It's guaranteed by the federal government, so it's completely not at risk, and there are no fees taken out of that. So if you pay a $400,000 RAD lump sum, that will come back to the family via an estate or whatever without any fees taken out, and it is not at risk.
Okay.
Sorry, unless we think the federal government balance sheet is at risk, and if that's the case, I think we're all in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ken.
Okay, so you've answered my next question, which is, does the family get the full amount back? So obviously that's good. What happens to the interest on that money? Is the family getting that back, or does that stay with the provider?
No, that stays with the provider. So with the providers, the nursing home providers, they will use that to fund their ongoing operations or expansion or refurbishment or whatever, which again, because it's guaranteed by the government from the family's point of view, is not a significant consideration, I don't think.
Gotcha. And given that amount is refundable, how often do you see that being refunded to families? Obviously once aged care is no longer needed.
Oh, it's certainly refunded to families. And look, there are some subtle estate planning issues around that. Now, we don't give estate planning advice. We always suggest to families that if they really have it's more of a complex matter, by all means talk to an estate planning specialist. But in the main, we say that when a husband and wife, one is going into care and one is not going into care, we say to the family, just have a think about if just dad or just mum has gone into care, just think about should that, because most wills, as you know, are done along the lines of if I go, it goes to my wife. If she goes, it goes to me. Once people go into aged care, we suggest they have a look at that and get some advice on that, because if you think about that, if I've paid a $400,000, I've got into care and my wife's still living at home, I then unfortunately pass away. If that $400,000 rate goes straight back to my wife and then she has to go into care one day, suddenly she's got an extra $400,000 of assets which may be accessible. Whereas it's sometimes appropriate to consider perhaps passing it to family members, whatever the will may say. So again, I don't want to get too bogged down in that. It's a detailed thing, but
it's best to get some advice around it.
We think so, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll ask is, not seeing a lot of comments, I just want to make sure people are able to hear us. If you're in the feed, maybe if you can just type hi or hello, or maybe even where you're joining us from tonight, so we can just quickly check that we've got you. I've got an iPad in front of me, but not seeing a lot of questions. I just want to make sure people are with us. If you're able just to quickly type in hi or hello, just to make sure you can hear us, that'd be fantastic. So while we wait for that to happen, I'll quickly look at my list of 20 questions and make sure where we're up to. As I said, my name's Ken. Seeing some comments come through now. Hi, Kerry. Hi, Francis. Someone in the Gold Coast. Fantastic. Hi, DK Ray. Fantastic. So good to see some people with us. Someone in Harvey Bay. Fantastic. Beautiful parts of the world here, David.
Especially in whale season.
There we go, whale season. Absolutely. In the middle of winter. And Deanne from Melbourne. Welcome to the feed. So as I said, my name's Ken. I'm one of the co-founders at Aged Care Reviews. This is our Facebook Live Q&A on aged care fees, finances and charges. If you've got any questions, please feel free to pop them in and we'll do our best to get them answered. David, I know you've prepared a couple of case studies to run through tonight. Obviously, without getting too technical, are you able to maybe quickly run through some of them just to show us how the fees work and maybe some of the impacts on families? Yeah,
it's just to give a feel, Kim, because I don't want to go into too much detail, because we go into sort of 5-year detailed cash flows around all the options that are open to a family. So what I try to do is do a simple example, and again, the numbers are all quite relative. So again, we've come back to that $400,000 room price.
Yep.
I've said there's a $750,000 home and there's $150,000 in the bank. Okay.
Yep.
Now, again, some people, and if they're living in the flasher parts of Sydney or Melbourne, that house price might be a bit low, but I understand that. But just to have a look, because in our experience, a lot of people tend to be in that zone if they're on full pensions. So in that situation, you've got the issue of, okay, if it's a single person, and I want to talk about single versus couple because it can be significantly different in how you approach that and the options you consider. But in that situation, $400,000 room, so you could rent the house. So we're going to rent the house and we're not going to pay any lump sum, and we're just going to pay the daily accommodation payment, that rental payment, okay?
Yep.
So in that situation, because my maths is not very good, Ken, so I can't use a calculator, so $400,000 at 5.73% is $22,920. You knew that anyway, didn't you? You just done that calculation.
I wish I was that quick.
Yeah. So that's, in that option, rent the home, okay, don't pay any lump sum. In that situation, that single person still gets the full age pension, just over $23,000, which as it is now, and with their other fees, or just put a bit of home maintenance in, etc., they only pay a means tested fee of just over $1,500 a year.
Okay.
So just getting a relative sense of that, okay, still getting the full pension, they're paying out this $22,000. The negative, and that all sounds good, doesn't it? But their negative cash flow just in the first year, and we'll just talk about the first year, is negative just under $22,000.
Right.
So they've got $150,000 sitting in the bank. We've left that there.
Yep.
So you can do the maths on that and say, well, how long
will that last?
Will that last?
Yep.
Now, if someone's got to be in that home for 10 years, there could be some challenges around that strategy.
Yeah, gotcha.
The other thing that happens with the home, and I want to just, again, the home is a whole separate area of discussion, what they call the home and the former home is treated in aged care, is that after 2 years of someone going into care, the home becomes an assessable asset. So they're no longer a homeowner. So from a Centrelink point of view, this is very important, from a Centrelink point of view, they're no longer a homeowner. So sometimes a few years down the track, that can impact. So one of the options we do in that situation is say, well, let's rent the home for 2 years, and then we're going to sell the home after 2 years because we know it's going to be accessible from an age pension point of view. So if we sell it after 2 years and we take the $400,000 from the proceeds, remember our $750,000 home, take the $400,000, pay a lump sum, what does that look like? So just comparing that option, this is where it impacts. The age pension drops from just over $23,000 down to just under $15,000. Okay, the means tested fee, instead of being $1,500, is just under $6,000. Okay, but, and this is the important thing. This is after the first year, I'm saying, but their overall cash flow, because they've done it this way, is $12,000, because what they've done also, they've paid some lump sum. And paying that lump sum has reduced that outgoing in terms of paying that full amount of that daily accommodation payment. Yeah.
So, and that's really important, probably to pause on. Really, what I'm hearing out of that, I'm not sure whether you guys in the feed are also hearing that. There's a lot of moving parts here. There's pensions, there's means tested care fees, there's houses, and lots of different options around assets and income, and slight tweaks makes a pretty big impact on the cash flow. So it's a pretty complex area. There's probably no hiding that, unfortunately. It's already complex. There's a lot of other stuff going on when a family's looking at aged care placement, a lot of emotion, a lot of stress. But this is pretty important stuff. There's a lot of money we're talking about here, and there's some pretty big swings between some strategies. So.
And I'm glad you mentioned the word cash flow, because a lot of families get very concerned because a lot of the older generation, they've been used to getting the age pension and they don't like anything impacting the age pension. As I say to families, sometimes it's not about whether you lose some of the age pension, it's what your overall cash flow is going to look like, because it's really about making sure you can pay the bills month in, month out, because any of the ongoing fees will be on a monthly basis from a nursing home. So it's really about looking at your cash flow, not, gee, I've lost some pension. Now we try and make sure that people don't lose pension, if possible, the age pension, but sometimes there's a trade-off. Yeah,
there's other parts to it that the families need to think about, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so do you have any other case studies there for us?
That's a single person, and where I wanted to mention about a couple, so the same scenario, it's a $750,000 home, one of the couple has to go in. It'll usually be the male because they're the weaker of the sexes, as we know, as my wife tells me all the time. So I'll be going into care, right? So I'm going into care. So we then look at what's the situation there? And this is where it gets very interesting, because the home, in that situation, if my wife is staying in the home, okay, it's an exempt asset. It doesn't count at all. Now, it doesn't count at all for Centrelink anyway, okay, but it doesn't count at all for the means tested fee we talked about.
Right.
If that wasn't the case, if I was single, in that example we were talking about before, the home is accessible for the means tested fee, but it's capped at just over $162,000. So it's important that the home is an exempt asset. if there is a protected person living in that home.
Yep.
And a protected person is a spouse, it's a carer, an official carer who's receiving a carer's payment from Centrelink, or a close family member that's been living there for at least 5 years and has received some sort of, or been eligible to receive some sort of income support payment from Centrelink.
Got you. So again, I suppose what I'm picking up, I'm not sure whether you guys are also picking it up in the feed, is situation's pretty different depending on obviously whether there's someone else living in the home and you know the home is the primary asset. So again, just probably another reason to delve behind the initial situation, get some advice to really understand where those rules fit in.
And why in this particular example, just coming back to that, for the $750,000 home, my wife's staying in the home, I'm going into care. What happens there is because our assessable assets then are only that $150,000, okay?
Yep.
Now, as people would know, it's the Centrelink rules apply to aged care as they do in most places as far as accessibility of assets for a couple. So it's basically $150,000 divided by 2. So my assessable assets in that situation are $75,000. If someone has less than $162,000 of assessable assets, and assuming they're just getting the pension as opposed to any other income, they are what they can enter care as what they call a low means resident. And what that means is, you know how we talked about the nursing home sets that room price at $400,000?
Yep.
For low means residents, that room price is not set like that. There is a calculation done, which the government does, which we also do for families as well, which is what they call an accommodation contribution. And what the government's basically saying, if you've got less than that amount of assets, you don't pay that full room price.
Full amount.
You pay a discounted amount based on this calculation. Now, the example I did, for example, you know, just this one that we're talking about, the actual room price based on what they call an accommodation contribution, as I said before, would be $84,000.
Right.
So instead of $400,000, it's $84,000. And again, we're just using this as a general general example here. Now, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, massive.
And that's where, with couples, it's always good to get advice well in advance.
Yeah.
Even if a husband and wife are going to go into care at the same time, we've had a number of situations like that. We say to families, we're going to stagger that by 1 day.
Okay. So that makes a difference, does it?
Makes a huge difference.
Right. There you go.
Huge difference. Depending on their other assets and circumstances, makes a huge difference.
So we've got a question here from Michelle. She's an aged care trainer, and she wants to pass information on to her students. If a proposed resident does not have any access to financial help to pay the initial bond now required to go into a facility, what happens? How many fully government funded beds are there, or will there be available? So I think that question's probably going to what you've just talked about, which is if a family, if a resident doesn't have those assets, what happens?
Yep. Can I just say, so if they've got less than $162,000, they're a low means resident. If they have less than $47,500,
yep,
and there are a number of people in that situation in Australia. They don't pay anything in terms of the cost of that room. The government covers all that cost.
Right.
Okay. All they pay is that. Remember that basic daily fee we talked about, the $49.07 a day, 85% of the age pension. That's all they will pay. Now the issue with that is though those rooms are quite popular for people that don't have the assets above those either $47,500 or $162,000.
Gotcha.
And again, the number of rooms, every aged care facility in Australia has to have a number of beds set aside for low means residents, and that varies depending on, it ranges from 15% in some locations up to 40%, and that'll just depends on the demographics and the geography of the area, and that's how that works. So, as I say to families, if you do have someone going into care that could be a low means resident, ask the aged care facilities in the area that you're looking at, will you accept my mother, my father, whoever it might be, as a low means resident? Do you have beds available?
Yeah.
And if they say yes, I suggest families move quickly.
Right.
Because they tend to be very, very popular.
Gotcha. Hope that answered the question, Michelle. Obviously, thanks for joining the feed. Appreciate the question, and thanks for helping the community to understand that valuable point. So just to refresh and to pause, my name's Ken. I'm one of the co-founders here at Aged Care Reviews. This is our Facebook Live Q&A about aged care fees, finances and charges. If you've got a question, feel free to pop it into the comments just like Michelle has there, and we'll do our best to answer it. Equally, if this feed is adding value to you and or you think may be useful to your family or friends, please feel free to share share this feed by clicking the share button. Obviously, it'd be great to share that with friends and relatives if they're looking at aged care in the near future. And lastly, we have a free aged care fees fact sheet that we make available to families. So if you'd like a copy of that, please click on the heart button. I should probably know its name, the little heart emoticon or whatever they're called. I'll get my tech lingo right at some point. Click on the heart and we'll make sure we get a copy to you. So we're speaking obviously through the case studies there a lot about the different types of fees. You mentioned before there was something I didn't quite catch. There was an additional fee that sometimes is charged on top of the basic fee, the means tested fee, and this accommodation payment. Can you elaborate on what that is?
That varies by facility. They'll have what they call extra or additional service fees, and they can be from anything from perhaps having Foxtel connected. It could be having a glass of wine of an evening. There's a whole way. If you go to a nursing home, they'll give you a list of things. If they are offering extra or additional services, they'll say, here's what you get for this amount. And sometimes that will be $10 a day, sometimes it'll be $20 a day. It varies across facilities. Some of them are also now charging, and I hate to sort of even go into this because it's called an asset replacement charge or contribution, which is again them saying this is additional fee that has to be paid because of the cost of the upkeep of the structure. I'm not defending that particular fee, Ken, but I just know that in the matters we do, families we look after, sometimes that has come up, and that is again something where you've got to. It's how do you deal with that with cash flow with a lot of those fees.
Yeah. Okay. So I suppose the main message there really is there's a number of different types of fees. So that you've got the basic fee, which is calculated towards the pension. You've got your means tested care fee, which looks at your assets and your income. You've got your accommodation payment, which can be lump sum or sort of the daily rental type charge. Then there's this fourth type of fee, which is on top of that for some extra services, Foxtel and wine. So obviously families need to be aware of all those different types of fees when they're going in and having a look at some facilities. Again, without getting into too much detail, are there particular rules or sort of special rules around if someone's a veteran, for example?
There are, in terms of the DVO rules are slightly different, and also for war widows. It's just that, it depends on whether a veteran has seen service or is qualified for service or not. So there's all little nuances in there about that. In the main, some of their pension payments, their DVO payments, will not be means tested, so that can be a positive in terms of that means tested fee calculation.
Yep.
But it is a case by case situation.
Gotcha.
Whenever we deal with families like that, we have to get a copy of their DVA or statement, and sometimes they're very hard to.
It gets pretty complex.
It gets a little messy there, but again, it's worth sorting through because sometimes it can mean the difference between, someone easily affording to be in care versus not.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, obviously, if you have any questions out there, obviously, first of all, thanks for joining us tonight. If you've got any questions out there, feel free to pop them in the comments box. What's the number one question you tend to get from families to do with aged care sort of fees and charges?
I don't want to use the exact language because I don't, but...
family-friendly fees,
Yeah, family-friendly. But how does all this work?
Yeah.
I mean, from a general point of view, and that's why one of the services we offer families is a 30-minute free phone call. So we'll have a chat for 30 minutes because, look, some families, as I said before, they've done their research or are sort of kind of on track. They just need a little gentle push in direction. Now that's the minority of families because once they once we talk to them, we say, look, there's all this sort of stuff. They say, look, we might need advice. And I say, well, that's fine. We can provide that advice, and that becomes personal advice, which obviously we charge a fee for. But or you go and see your financial advisor if if you deal with a financial advisor that you're comfortable that can give you that advice.
Yeah. Okay. And as David mentioned, he does offer a free, no obligation 30-minute phone call with members of Aged Care Reviews of our website. So if you would like to take David up on his offer and have that 30-minute discussion with him, obviously no obligation thereafter, feel free to either make a comment or why don't we use the smiley face. So if you're interested to chat to David, click the smiley face icon and we'll make sure he gets connected to you through Facebook. Got a question from Francis, I think, who asked, is there a fee for advice from brokers such as you, or is this a government service? So I think you've kind of touched on that.
No, we're not a broker per se. We're a financial advisor. So my team provides specialist financial advice in aged care, and we charge a fee, and it's based on the amount of time involved. But because we specialise in this area, we tend to be very efficient at being able to get the information required. For example, remember we talked about that form that families have to fill in for DHS, the Centrelink one, which is 28.5 pages. Our fact find, which we ask families to fill in, is 6 pages. So if they've already done the Centrelink form, I say this is a walk in the park, our fact find. Yeah. If we get that fact find back with any supporting information, if people have term deposits or they've got investment properties, whatever it might be, we get that back. We can get advice, initial advice prepared very quickly. And we do it. We tend to keep the fee down by doing a lot of it by email and phone, as opposed to physical meeting. 99% of the work we do for families is done via email and phone. And just to give you a sense of the fee, our average fee is $750 plus GST. It increases if there's couples involved, and it's more complex, obviously. But that's our fee, and for that we provide up to 5 options. So those options we talked about paying a lump sum, not paying a lump sum, paying some lump sum, and looking at the various impacts on cash flow. And we do 5-year detailed cash flows for each of those options. It's a very comprehensive document, and again, because we specialise this and we do a lot of this work, we're able to keep our fees, I think, very, very reasonable.
And based on some of those case studies, obviously they're not specific, but some of the effect of looking at that situation can be savings in the thousands of dollars, potentially.
I think it is. There's savings in that, but it's also peace of mind for the family. And the other thing is with families, what we find is there's always one sibling who's usually tasked with the job of doing this. There might be 3 or 4 siblings in the family, and everyone's busy and they've got things going on. But we find that one tends to be carrying the load. And what I say to that person, if we're doing this, look, you need to have a document, whether it's from us or from someone else. Get a document, because what happens with families, they all second guess it after the event. Why did you choose to pay $400,000? Why did you choose to rent mum's home? Why did you, whatever it might be. We just see that, we say, look, have that for peace of mind, for your peace of mind, and to stop any future family squabbles about. That's why we chose option 1 or 5 or whatever it might be.
Gotcha. Yeah, and certainly, as we know at Aged Care Reviews, we deal with a lot of families. It's particularly stressful. We deal with a lot of those family members who are tasked by the rest of the family, and anything to take away the stress from what they're looking at, I think is certainly worthwhile. Got a question here from Danielle. Danielle, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you joining the feed, and appreciate your question. Danielle asks, for single persons on the full age pension with cash assets, say $350,000 in the bank, but no home ownership, what is the best way of paying for care to maximise cash flow? Is it best to divest some of the cash first, say funeral bond, or to reduce the means-tested care fee?
That's getting a little. Who's asked that question? Sorry,
Danielle.
It's getting a little specific there, Danielle. The answer to be depends, obviously, and that's a really good point you raise about funeral bonds. A lot of people that are on that threshold of being able to reduce their assets or not reduce their assets to either become considered low means residents is important. Now, as you know, you can pay A funeral bond is not an assessable asset, so you can pay money towards a funeral bond of any amount. It's capped at a certain amount. I think it's $12,750 now. It's just gone up. I think that's what it might be. You can gift money to family members. There are restrictions around that. They're the Centrelink gifting rules around that. You can do as a single person or as a couple $10,000 a year or $30,000 over 5 years to again reduce that assessable asset. But other than that, the assets are the assets. So in that situation, if you could reduce it by a little bit and then you'll use some to pay a lump sum, to pay a RAD, that will be assessable for means testing, but won't be assessable from the Centrelink pension point of view. So that's the trade-off between the thresholds in terms of Centrelink, non-homeowner, single person on the pension. What's the threshold of assets that they can have before their pension may reduce?
It sounds like Danielle, wasn't it? So Danielle, if you'd like to have that discussion with David, 30 minutes free, no obligation discussion, to maybe chat about some of those personal circumstances, feel free to click the smiley face icon and we'll make sure we put you in touch with David to arrange that. And obviously, if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them into the comments. If this feed's adding value to either yourself or you think maybe a value to your friends or family, feel free to share the feed by clicking the share button. Probably coming to a close now, unless there's any other questions. What are your top 3 tips to families who are looking at the whole aged care fees sort of scenario?
Make informed decisions. Now, whether you need to get advice from someone like myself, and I would say that, of course, about getting advice, but even just make an informed decision. So if you're comfortable that you've got all the information you need to make the right decision on behalf of a loved one, that's what I say to families. And when we have a 30-minute chat, we say some people are really on track, and if their situation's quite simple, I say, look, no, you're on track. This is how that works. I think you'll be okay.
Yeah.
And what I then send them an email and I say, look, I think you're on track, but by the way, if you need this, here's how it can work if you want us to give personal advice. That's what I just, because it is a complex area, I don't want families to make a decision without understanding all the implications of that.
Gotcha. So it was one tip. So.
Oh, that was three. That was three tips in one.
It was worth 3.
So, I think so.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, don't want to put you on the spot. So.
You put me on the spot all evening. What are you talking about, Ken?
There we go. So, look, hopefully, if you've joined us tonight or you're watching this after the feed, you've got some value out of the discussion. Hopefully, we've demystified aged care fees a little bit for you. Obviously, you know, what David's talked about and the scenarios he's run through, it seems like it's pretty important to at least get some advice on the topic, even if you don't fully go down that path, but obviously to be informed. I want to thank you for joining us on our Facebook Live Q&A tonight. Appreciate it if you've joined live, if you've thrown in a question. Appreciate that and helping out the community. Thank you more particularly to David and to Morgan's Financial for hosting us tonight. Very professional setup here. Look like we're on a TV set. So appreciate what you guys have done for us tonight, and appreciate David for joining us and your decades of experience in answering these questions. I'll sign off by simply saying again, if you think this Q&A has been of value or can be of value to your friends or family, feel free to share it. Other than that, signing off from Brisbane. Have a good night and thank you for joining us.